Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my regular show. And I'm back at home in the office, ready to deliver show number 263 on Sunday, the 14th of August. So what have we got for you today then? Well, actually, quite a long show, I suspect. Got a story about an Aussie teen who's been left critically injured after what appears to have been a chase by a car. We have some spy shots, or at least one spy shot of the baby Triumph, which just comes a week after the rumour that it was about to appear. How about that then? There's a surprise. The Arc Vector appears to be ready for delivery once again. You can buy an Oxford coat hanger for just £20. I'll also be looking at some high-tech boots from ROAME, which come with built-in turn and brake lights. I'll show you how to keep your cool with 3 helmet air conditioning systems. No joke there, honestly. And you can help out a biking questionnaire on motorcycle use as part of a master's project, if you are so inclined. And then the final point will be looking at the evidence for the rural 20 limits. You may remember that a couple of shows ago I talked about Surrey and their plans to introduce a blanket 20 and 30 mile per hour limit across the whole of the Surrey Hills area of outstanding natural beauty. I'm going to take quite a long look at that. So if you're interested in what is kind of involved in setting speed limits, hang on in there till the end of the show. So meanwhile, don't forget events that are up and around in the next few days. If I can find the right button to press. For some reason, the button that I want has disappeared off screen. Hang on a second. Let's just get rid of that and bring that one in. There it is. August 18th, that's Thursday, coming this week. Weather forecast is actually not too bad at the moment, rather cooler, pleasanter to ride. So if you are out and about on the bike and you happen to be somewhere between London and Hastings, why not drop in at the Route 1066 Cafe? It's just outside Robertsbridge on the I think it's the A21. Better check my map before I head off there, because I'm going to be there for the Emergency Services Day. It's actually more of a lunchtime event, 11 till 2, I think it is. Drop in and say hi. I'll be there to talk about the science of being seen and, of course, anything else anybody wants to talk about motorcycling. Paul has looked in. Good morning, Paul. Good to see you. Right, so that is coming up on the Thursday, 18th of August. So get yourselves over there if you possibly can around the lunchtime period. Now, one other thing to talk about, of course, I've just actually put taken the picture off. I actually wanted it back up again. Don't forget other events that are coming up in the very near future. I've just mentioned the Emergency Services show, but there's the live online talk series. September's event is all about systems and riding systematically, and I'll be talking about the difference between the two. I expect that one to have some fairly lively feedback. Do drop in for that. Wednesday, 7th of September, and then we're back to Science of Being Seen, but an in-depth one on visibility, conspicuity and camouflage, and that will be the October talk on the 5th. Both of those are ready to book right now if you know that you're going to be around. Right now, it really has been another extraordinarily hot morning here in London. As just yet another day in this truly extraordinary summer. So I was amused to see that the Bennett's Bike Social page has a new article on how to clean your bike without water should you be having a hosepipe ban at the moment. Frankly, I'd probably not bother, but if you do want to find out about waterless cleaners, that's the place to go. But Perth, Western Australia, that's another hot part of the world in summer. But out there, police are investigating an incident in which 3 people were hospitalised, including one of a pair of teenagers who were riding what was alleged to be a stolen motorcycle through the city. Now, the crash left Ronaldo Penny, 18 years old, with critical injuries. His 17-year-old passenger was also injured, and so was the 79-year-old woman driving a Toyota Kluger, and this rolled over and caught fire in the instant. Now, Police Commissioner Colt Blanche said that any further charges would be laid once evidence was found. He also said an investigation was ongoing into whether the woman was chasing the motorcycle, and he did confirm that 2 motorcycles had been taken from the address where that woman lived. The 17-year-old boy has been charged with 3 offences, including aggravated home burglary and stealing. And the police commissioner said that they'd be looking at how the motorcycles were stolen, who else was in the company of the 2 males who are now in hospital, and how the Toyota Kluger came to be there and the manner in which it was driven prior to the crash. And he added, "I would give a strong message to the community that nothing is worth dying over when it comes to property." He said, "Call the police." Now, hot on the heels of last Sunday's look at the rumours of the long-awaited baby triumph, then what appear to be some very carefully staged so-called spy shots have appeared online, which clearly show the new Bajaj Triumph being ridden through what is equally clearly an English landscape. So here's the bike in question, and as you can see, very English-looking pavement and wall, and there's another one where the bike's going past some houses, and very conveniently the rider has just happened to stop opposite the person with the phone or the camera to check his phone. Couldn't have been staged more beautifully, could it? Now, as you can see, the bike's a roadster design, and the right-hand engine case there has the very conventional sort of, whoops, that's the wrong picture. Why has that just jumped out of? So I was just trying to get it zoomed in a little bit. You can see the sort of triangular engine case there, and you can also see that it's very clearly a single cylinder. No confirmation on engine size, but you can see from the angle of the exhaust pipe it's a single. There's a radiator in the way, which means that that pipe comes out at a slightly weird angle, doesn't it? And it's clearly a double overhead cam too. So I don't think I like the look of that exhaust system, but the rest of the bike sort of looks fairly standard roadsterish, doesn't it? So nothing outrageous or remarkable there. Pretty much, I think, what everybody would have expected. But there you go. That's the latest from the Triumph rumour mill. Now, if the baby Triumph is likely to be aimed at the budget end of the market, you can't say the same about this next motorcycle. And this is the Arc Vector. It's actually hard, I think, to top this bike for irrelevance, personally, when it comes to the ordinary rider. Yes, it's ultra exclusive, but it's ultra expensive. How about £110,000? Yes, you did hear that right. Now, Vector has been described as an ultra premium electric motorcycle with claims for 133 horsepower and 292 foot-pounds of torque. But the interesting thing it comes with is the exotic human-machine interface. Now, this means that the rider's going to be able to interact with the bike via a custom-made riding jacket and a helmet which features a heads-up display, including rear vision via a rear-facing camera. You get voice activation of the bike's various features too, and the helmet itself will trigger the keyless ignition. Now, when this bike was first announced at the Milan Motorcycle Show in late 2018, it was said the bike would be manufactured at a production facility in Wales, but the company stumbled on into financial difficulty almost immediately, despite raising nearly £1 million through crowdfunding. Now, by October 2019, Arc Motorcycles had gone into administration, but the founder, Mark Truman, formerly a manager at Land Rover Jaguar, he bought the company assets when a buyer couldn't be found, and by September 2020 the website and social media pages were back online. Now, in October 2020, Arc announced it was ready to release the first 10 limited edition Vector Angel Edition prototypes to 10 lucky customers. Now, at the time, it was said deliveries would take around 12 months, so the autumn of 2021. So where are we right now, almost a year later in mid-August 2022? Well, the bike has now been seen in public. It was ridden by former BSB star James Ellison at Goodwood in July, although he wasn't wearing the helmet or the clothing. The latest press release suggests that Arc has now announced again a further delivery date. The first 10 prototypes are said to be nearly ready and is now set for next month, September. Mark Truman was good with himself. He said more details would be available in the coming weeks. But if the bikes are almost ready to deliver, that doesn't mean they're ready to hit the road, because these first Angel Edition prototypes will first of all have to undergo a lengthy testing program on track. Now, it seems the lucky buyers will be able to participate in that. And that's presumably to gain some homologation for the models to make it road legal. And after that, the buyers are promised a bike with a beta version of the HMI, which they can go and test on public roads, which rather smacks of the sort of Tesla approach to see if it crashes and then fix it approach to development. Now, only at the end of that development period does it appear that the 10 customers will actually get production-ready bikes, and that's said to be 2 years on, so we're looking at late 2024, early 2025 if everything runs to schedule. Nothing much else seems to have done for Vector so far. So I'd guess there's almost certainly going to be more delays till the production bikes go on sale. Meanwhile, we're still waiting for confirmation on the claimed specs for the bike. The company's previously given a 0 to 60 time of just over 3 seconds and a 120 mile per hour, 200 kph top speed. That's believable. But the original claim combined that with performance with the range of 270 miles or 436 kilometers. And since the necessary energy to travel that far at speed is drawn from a Samsung battery pack with a capacity of just 16.8 kilowatt hours, a number of people, myself included, have said that it seems like a sort of unicorn in terms of combination. So it could be why one more recent article has actually indicated that the range is now said to be up to 200 miles in the city with 120 miles on the highway. That's still pretty much outer limits for battery performance, but it is at least rather more credible. Now, in case Vector don't empty your wallet, Oxford Products will. Listen to this. Motorcycle gear weighs so much that a regular clothes, especially leathers, that it destroys regular coat hangers in no time. Well, funnily enough, I've been hanging my leathers, jacket and trousers up on the wrong kind of coat hangers, it appears, for years, and I never realised. But Oxford have our backs, because they now have the 0G heavy-duty hanger, which is apparently designed to handle the heaviest weighting kit and is made entirely from heavy gauge steel. It can carry 25 kilograms of kit, or 55 pounds, or to put it another way, just under 4 stone, a very small child, for example. I can't readily find my spring balance, which I would weigh my one-piece racing leathers with if I could have done, but I'm very much certain that they don't weigh anything like the weight of a small child. So if there is a burden to this story, it's the price. You can buy one of these coat hangers for a mere $19.99. Frankly, you could just take the option to head down to IKEA and buy some standard wooden coat hangers of the sort that my kit's hung on. You can get those for a £5 from IKEA for no less than 8 of those coat hangers. That means you can save the other £15 and put it in the petrol tank. Now, don't forget, if you set a reminder for this show, it goes out on Wednesdays and Sundays at 11. It nearly always goes out live. Very occasionally, there's a recorded session. And even more rarely, I miss one due to other activities. I've just come back from holiday, but I actually did manage to find time to run the show while I was on holes. So, if you miss it, you can catch up, obviously, here on YouTube, or you can head over to my YouTube channel, which is Survival Skills UK. Do not forget the all-important UK on the end, though, or you will find somebody sharpening Boy Scouts. Right, okay, so where are we now? Well, if Oxford haven't yet come up with a super strength boot shelf, it would be a surprise, but it would be the perfect place to pop your brand new ROAME Zero shoes in pride of place. Now let me get a picture of those up for you. What's so special about these particular boots? Well, there you are, there you can see it. Excuse me. They actually come with indicator lights on them. They're said to be the most advanced boots on the market. They're also said to be designed as a comfortable all-day shoe and not just a protective boot. And that's something I've complained about in the past, as I do tend to walk around in my boots, of course, while I'm running training courses and things. That's actually quite an attractive feature. And the way they get this comfort, they say, is by using impact protection from the UK company D30, which Paul probably know a lot more about than I do. Now, they make sort of adaptive body armor, which under normal conditions is soft and flexible, but when it's struck hard, when it's impacted, then it goes stiff to absorb the energy from the blow and sort of spread it over a bigger area. So they don't just come with these wireless turn signals, of course. You get more features than that. They also come with brake lights. Now, naturally, the rave reviews tell you all about the added visibility that these boots give you. I'd have some concerns personally using them in England. I would say that under normal circumstances, of course, we'd be using them in wet weather. This year summer has been very exceptional, of course, but I would be rather concerned about how long the LEDs and the associated electricity actually will work. Now, each shoe is charged via a port built into the shoe, although I couldn't see where that port actually is, whether it's in or outside. And they connect via a box which goes under the motorcycle seat, and that is plumbed into your circuitry for the brakes and indicators. I'd be interested to know actually why they don't use Bluetooth, because they claim that the system used is a patented wireless link. Bluetooth is the industry standard. I don't know why they felt it necessary to develop their own version of wireless communication. The boots don't come cheap. They're $299 a pair, and as you could see from those photos, they're currently showing sold out. If you want an ordinary set of their boots minus the flashing lights, then you can get them for a rather more reasonable $1,199, and you can find their website here. Okay, as I rather suspected may happen, Paul's just chipped in. What's he got to say? There he says they've been around since 2016, a Kickstarter campaign. Oh, well, you see, Paul knows more about this than I do. Right, there we go. So, excellent stuff. Right, thank you for that, Paul. Always useful insight from Paul Valsbury on anything to do with protective clothing. Must admit, I hadn't seen those boots until they popped up on my newsfeed the other day. So obviously been around a bit longer than I was aware of. Thank you very much for sharing that. Right, okay, so if we are talking about products today, one thing I did want to cover was the air-conditioned helmet. Now, this may seem like a particularly daft idea, but it is a thing, and here we have the first picture I wanted to show you. That was a bit pixelated. I'm not quite sure why that is. This is the Fayer helmet, developed by American rider and inventor Steve Fayer, and he first showed off what he claimed was the world's first self-contained air-conned helmet back in 2018. And I'll come back to the first of the type in just a moment. The helmet, which actually has none of the usual vents that you'd find on such a helmet, is actually equipped with a miniature air-con pump at the back, which dehumidifies and cools the air. A fan then circulates it through what's described as a patented tubular spacer fabric, which is a kind of honeycomb layer. The results said to be a decrease in temperature inside the helmet of 6 to 8 degrees centigrade, 10 to 15 Fahrenheit. Now, Fayer apparently invented this fabric in Hawaii. Obviously, it's fairly hot and humid, and it's been used to cool the seats of a range of premium cars. The aircon unit gets powered from the bike's own electrical system or a portable battery pack, so it does have to be plugged into something. It sits at the rear of the helmet there, and I would have some concerns about the shape of the helmet, but it does apparently have ECE certification. I can't tell you whether that's the latest ECE 2006 or the older 2005. I don't know. The helmet does appear to be only available in the US for the moment, but it is $599. And if you want to see a video of the helmet as being produced, then there is a link to it here. Now, US bike mags have been claiming Fayer's helmet is a world first, which is true if you don't or if you remember that the words were self-contained. But in terms of the first ever helmet with aircon, he's actually about 30 years late. I must admit, I didn't know this myself, but there was a helmet developed by AGV, the Italian company, all the way back in the late 80s. There is a picture of it. As you can see, it's not self-contained. The aircon unit there is separate to the helmet, and the whole thing plugs into the bike. There it is. And into the helmet at the other end. Now, that was 30-year-old technology. Astonishingly, though, if you want to buy one, there's actually one on eBay, or at least there was as of yesterday afternoon, for just $35. Although if you do want to import it into the UK, it will set you back another $75 odd for shipping and import duty. But there you go. If you're an early bird, you may snap that one up. And well, how good a 30-year-old helmet is anybody's guess, but there it is, available to buy if you want to add it to a helmet collection, because it's a fairly unique item. Now, there is a third alternative, which I'm going to show you. If I can actually get to press the right button. Here we go. This is the one. Take a look at this. Now, this is yet a third option for you. And what you can see here is a rider with a little backpack on and a sort of a cooling tube going up into the helmet. Now, this is the invention of one Sandeep Dihaya. Sandeep is a Bengaluru-based mechanical engineer, and he's also a Harley-Davidson rider, and he's had concerns about getting overheated in the hot, humid environment in which he and his local colleagues will ride, and so he's developed this hardware which can be retrofitted to a standard helmet, although you will have to send the helmet off to his company in India. Now, the pipes going into the helmet itself actually connect to a 12-volt solid state air conditioner, so it doesn't have a compressor like the others. It only has a thermoelectric component which draws current again from the bike's battery. Now, once activated, Sandeep says the temperature inside the helmet can be 12 degrees, didn't specify whether C or F, lower than the outside air temperature, and the cooler itself comes in that small knapsack which is worn on the back. Slightly weird looking arrangement, but hey ho. Although I can't see the average rider in India needing to use the option much south of the Himalayas, there is actually a heating mode for this helmet as well, so you can get a hot helmet as well as a cooled one for the same price. Total weight added to the helmet is just 150 grams. The backpack weighs in at about 1.8 grams. And interestingly, he says he's developing a solar powered version 2. Now, I completely forgot to share a survey on motorcycle commuting, which Alex Parsons Hulse at Hull University asked me to do. It's part of his MSc dissertation. It's a short questionnaire. It's confidential. It's anonymous. And if you take a couple of minutes of your day to fill it in, be assured you will be helping to support some research into motorcycling and motorcycle use, and hopefully help guarantee the future of two-wheel transport. Now, I did actually have the link on the write-up I've done, but I somehow seem to have failed to put it into the notes, so I'll add those at the end of the show, the link to the survey. But if you can do it, that would be good. Now, I did warn you that I am going to finish off with a look at Surrey's proposed blanket 20-mile-per-hour limit for the Surrey Hills. So what have I got to say about that? Well, as I said, it's a long piece, but I think you find it interesting. Let's start with Surrey's Matt Furness. He's a County Council Cabinet Member for Transport, Infrastructure and Economy. And he said, evidence suggests that implementing lower speed limits should reduce the number and severity of road collisions, whilst also helping to support our active travel programme, improve air quality and address concerns over excessive vehicle noise. So I'm going to take an in-depth look at those various claims. Now, let's get the easy ones out of the way first. Now, firstly, some of the supporters of the lower limit really have just lost the plot on this. One paper reported that the move would tackle dangerous driving from joyriders and scrambler motorcycles who are at risk of colliding with other vehicles. I'm not quite sure who was responsible for that quote, but Capel Parish Councillor Stuart McLachlan apparently told the Sunday Times, "We get joyriders in 4x4s coming at midnight, charging up and down the byways. They come in the winter when it's all muddy and after dark. They buy an old banger for £50, run it into the ground and just set fire to it." Now, very few drivers actually venture down the byway, although they are legal rights of way. Well, actually, byways aren't, but if they are roads used as public, as roads with access for motor vehicles, there are various terms for them, then they do have access. So if they're being used illegally on routes which are not accessible for vehicles, how's the speed limit going to tackle that particular issue? Anyway, is it really an issue? Do people really buy 4x4s for 50 quid and then burn them? I don't know, but I can't honestly remember passing through Surrey and seeing the lanes littered with blazing Range Rovers. And yes, there are nuisance riders around, but again, this is an enforcement issue. It's not actually anything to do with speed limits. If you want to stop nuisance riders, then you tackle nuisance riders. You don't put a blanket speed limit in, because they're not going to obey them, are they? Now, secondly, noise is an issue, particularly when you live in the country and when noise travels. But frankly, the modern vehicle is so quiet, you really can't hear it more than a few meters away. There have been cars going past the window here, just sort of 10 meters, well, less than 10 meters away. But and yeah, I can hear them through the headphones, but only just, and the windows are wide open today. The real problem, again, is exhaust tampering. And yes, there are car drivers who tamper with exhaust, but the big problem really is likely to be motorcycles. I'm pointing the finger at us, bikers here. And loud exhausts do carry long distances in quiet rural environments. But again, it's a tampering issue, and lowering the speed limit is not going to address it. Longer term, of course, the switch to EVs will make vehicles even quieter. Third, air quality. Is it really an issue on rural roads? Now, I don't have time to dive into data because I want to get onto speed limits, but generally I would say that air pollution from vehicles is associated with high traffic density and slow speeds, and particularly stationary traffic, hence the advice to turn engines off when you are stopped. So we are talking towns. Yes, pollution does drift from urban areas away into the country, and we do well to reduce air pollution generally, I agree, but in change of term, whether we're going to change things overall, targeting rural roads by reducing speed limits seems like a bit of a smokescreen, if you'll pardon the pun. Now, as for active travel, in my rare forays these days out on a bicycle or when I'm walking, I don't enjoy having to jump into a hedge to avoid a high-speed vehicle. But is that a repeated issue? Well, no, not in my experience. I mean, honestly, I can say that I've had to take evasive action a couple of times in my entire life. Now, personally, I love taking motorcycle down the sort of the little right windy lanes and things because I hardly ever encounter anybody else, pedestrians, cyclists, horse riders or other vehicles. They are generally pretty empty. And final point, I would suggest that many of the people actually taking the advantage of active transport, i.e. walking, cycling, are actually driving to the location to get to the Surrey Hills for their location from outside, because it is an area of natural beauty. Right, speed limits then. What's the evidential basis for a trial of lower rural speed limits? That's the real question we should all be asking here. Now, rural roads often present the dangers of difficult corners, prospect of high-speed head-on collisions, a lack of passive safety, and obstacles such as trees at the side of the road. That what came out in one news article clearly briefed on these proposals. And Conservative MP David Davies, he said, it's increasingly anomalous that speeds have been reduced to 20 in urban areas, yet on country lanes it is extremely dangerous. So we'll come on to see what that particular statement might be based on. Meanwhile, Mary Williams, CEO of the charity Brake, who, as we probably all know, wants to literally put the brakes on cars, said that rural roads pose, quote, so many unpredictable risks, whether a branch around a corner, someone on a bike or an animal. Yeah, right, okay. But is that unpredictable risk unique to rural roads. Are urban roads completely predictable? Do we never meet a hazard around a blind corner on an urban road? Do we never meet someone riding a cycle erratically? Do we never meet a random pedestrian doing a sheep impersonation and wandering across in front of traffic, oblivious to what's going on? Well, I would say that all roads have their own unpredictable hazards, which, truth be told, are mostly entirely predictable. So if you are riding past a playground, for example, it's the old favourite driving instructor sort of consequences and example. If you see a bouncing ball, expect a small child. It's not rocket science. Neither is expecting to meet a tractor coming the other way on a country lane. Neither is it impossible to imagine that there might be pedestrians or cyclists or horse riders around the corner. So yes, there are unpredictable incidents everywhere, but real off-the-wall stuff is pretty rare. So maybe that's an education issue. Now, Surrey's Matt Furness, coming back to him, he also said this project is an important opportunity for us to improve the safety of our rural roads in the south and southwest of Surrey and ensure that the most appropriate speed limit is applied to each. Most rural roads in the area are still subject to the national speed limit of 60 miles per hour, which is inappropriate for these types of roads. Now, that sounds entirely reasonable at first, because of the assumption that if there's a higher limit, you must be therefore driving at higher speeds. And if you assume that, it's easy again to assume that any crash is likely to happen at those higher speeds. And we know, it's well documented, if we crash at higher speed, then there is a link to more serious impact. In short, faster roads, faster driving, more likely to be killed. But the first thing I would say is that the speed limit is just that. It's not the speed that people actually travel at. And any speed limit is an artificial construct. Now, the AA has also raised concerns these measures will not necessarily have the desired outcome. And they've said that 20 mph speed limits only make sense where there's a specific danger, and that speed limits work in places where they make sense to drivers, where there is a particular hazard that requires drivers to slow down. Okay, on some science. A paper entitled Effects of Speed Limits on Speed and Safety, a Review, authored by one Chester G. Wilmot and Amanda Canal, and published in a journal called Transport Reviews in 1999, said, quote, "It is observed that generally motorists do not adhere to speed limits, but instead choose speeds they perceive as acceptably safe. Perceptions of safety are influenced by the environment in which travel takes place, such as whether the road is a controlled access facility, so motorway basically, where there are limited places you can get on and off. Where was I? The nature of the adjoining land use, the geometry of the road, and existing weather conditions." And they said the relationship between speed and safety is influenced by factors such as the type of road, driver age, and vehicle safety devices. And yeah, this is more or less the old 85th percentile method of setting speed limits. No one actually sets out to kill themselves. Let's get that clear. Nobody else on the road is a target for a driver or a motorcyclist. So any absence of limit, most of us adopt a speed which seems to us to be the one that will get us to our destination in one piece and in a reasonable time. We go quicker where driving is easy, we go slower where it's trickier. So in the past, speed limits were set to the highest speed that 85% of drivers would naturally travel at. Of course, that does mean there would be a few outliers, the other 15%, of course, going faster than the speed that was chosen. But here's the key point. Because it was set at the 85th percentile, most of the drivers would actually be traveling at a lower speed than the limit. And there's more evidence for this from a UK study with the snappy title of A Close Examination of Speed Limit Credibility and Compliance on UK Roads. And this was published as recently as April this year. Now, what the researchers did was they looked at various kinds of roads and they asked the study group what they thought was an appropriate kind of speed for those roads. And they looked at everything from motorways to single curved, single carriageway, curved rural roads. And here are the findings for the curved rural road. Most respondents perceived 40 miles per hour to be the appropriate speed limit on the curved rural road. Almost all the respondents intended to drive below the 60 mile per hour limit. Now, okay, that's just one example of one particular bit of road and one particular study group. But what it clearly shows is just because there is a potential limit of 60 miles an hour doesn't mean anybody is actually going to drive at that speed on that bit of road. So coming back to that statement, 60 is too fast for rural roads, the whole point of the limit is it's a fastest legal speed and nothing to do with the speed people actually drive at. So, right, what's Paul got to say? Oh, yes, here we are. He's just actually said the same as me. Speed limits used to be set at the 85th percentile value identified by traffic surveys. Now they appear to be set as a political contrivance and a panacea for all the whims of local politicians looking for re-election campaign issue and to stop a vocal minority of local residents. Right, well, oddly enough, I'll be coming back to that as well, Paul. Now, so next question then I thought about was, are these roads really crash hotspots? And what about the claims for the reduced numbers of crashes and crash severity? Now, the reports that have been circulating have been based on some figures from the Department of Transport that say rural roads are more dangerous than urban ones. Now, Surrey County Council has said rural roads have long been seen as the country's most dangerous, with most country roads still at a default 60 limit, which has remained in place since 1977. And Matt Furness, Surrey's speaker, once again said, evidence suggests that implementing lower speed limits should reduce the number and severity of road collisions. Now, I would like to see that evidence. Now, although that effect of speed limits on speed and safety paper is 20 years old, human behaviour doesn't change that much over time. And the authors there concluded that research shows that speed cannot be linked statistically to the instance of accidents, although it is statistically significant in accident severity. So get that, speed doesn't cause accidents. What causes injuries is the speed at which you're travelling when you hit something. So I went off to look at the UK's crash stats, and here are some observations. Now, the first is that most accidents actually happen at 30 miles per hour. And secondly, there are more fatal accidents at 30 than at 60. Now, the greatest proportion of fatal accidents actually happened on roads with a speed limit of between 21 and 30 miles per hour, 34% of the total. Now, I'm not going to go as far as to argue that this proves if you reduce the speed limit on a rural road, you'll actually up the risk of a fatal crash, because that's clearly nonsensical. I know somebody will try to say that at some point, but it does serve to show that the speed isn't the only factor in serious road collisions, as that paper I just quoted from concluded. Now, so what actually is the nature of the problem? Well, where did the extremely dangerous argument come from? Well, it's probably based on data that finds that around 2/3 of fatal road crashes in the UK happen on rural roads. And the press release does state that in total, rural roads have an annual toll of around 10,000 deaths and serious injuries amongst motorists, cyclists and walkers. Now, incidentally, I noticed that motorcyclists don't appear to be included there unless they're lumped in, of course, with motorists. Now, that is, of course, a nationwide figure, so it doesn't refer to the county of Surrey, let alone the small area of the Surrey Hills. So when you do look at the data for Surrey, you find that it has around 600 people killed or seriously injured on roads each year. There was a bit of a blip for 2018 in the data that I looked at, which was 2005 to 2018. For some reason, in that 1 year, it jumped significantly by almost 50, or just over 50% actually, to 929. But that is all roads in Surrey. I can't find a breakdown of Surrey figures to show just how many of these deaths happened on rural roads and how many happened in urban areas. So if every death and injury in Surrey happened on rural roads, and taking that 2018 outlier and assuming nobody was killed in the urban environment, you would still be looking at less than 1% of the 10,000 annual UK total of killed and seriously injured on rural roads. Okay, we still want to get numbers down, but using the national figure to represent the problem on the local basis is, I feel, somewhat dishonest. Now, What I can tell you, though, is that the total casualty rate for all roads in the UK for 2020 is around 23,500. So if 10,000 happen rather on rural roads, that means that less than half the KSIs happen on rural roads nationwide. I don't know what the split is for Surrey, but I can't imagine it's dramatically different. Well, let's drill down a little bit more. Now, you have around 40 million drivers plus on the road. We suffer around 1,800 deaths per annum amongst drivers. And that's a figure that's been remarkably consistent for the last decade or so. Now, we can say that the rural roads are the location for most road deaths at 57%, despite only accounting for 43% of traffic, because that's absolutely true. But unless Surrey has some very unusual issues, the only way you can argue that rural roads are the most dangerous is by looking at deaths alone. The minute you look at injury collisions, the opposite's true. Rural roads now account for 32% of seriously injured and 25% of slight injuries. So if you're looking at injuries, then it's the other way around. It's urban roads which are more dangerous, but that's not what we were just told. My take here is that Surrey have mixed up the data sets that they're looking at to make the problem look worse than it is. So why would Surrey use such mixed and confused data? Maybe it's simple laziness. It does take a bit of effort to drill down to get the correct figures, but frankly, a council like Surrey should have the staff to do that, as well as easy access to all this data. Maybe it's simple laziness, I don't know. But it does make the problem seem more extreme than it is, and it wouldn't be the first time that statistics have been used selectively to highlight what is considered by some people to be a problem. So let's drill down another level. You probably noticed I've been talking about urban and rural, but what does that actually mean? What is a rural road? Well, around 10 years ago, the Department for Transport actually defined rural roads, and what they said was that these are major and minor roads outside urban areas and in places having a population of less than 10,000 people. Now, what I don't have is data that shows the split of casualties between the unclassified lanes that run through country areas and the main roads, which are classified as rural because they carry traffic through small towns and across these country areas. They are rural roads under that category. But what I did do was I took a quick look at the road casualty UK crash map. Now, I'll show you what I found. Let's just pop that up full screen for a moment. Now, it's a little bit difficult to see, unfortunately, because the push pins which Google puts in are alongside the push pins which mark the accidents. But I think what you can see, let me just zoom in on the middle of the picture here. That is Cranley in Surrey. It's a town of just under 10,000 according to the population stats, and what you'll see is that the majority of those yellow and orange push pins, ignore these sort of blue and green ones because they're nothing to do with what I'm talking about here, happen along the roads through the town. Now, if I sort of scroll around the picture into the rural areas, there's a nice rural area, and you'll see that there are in fact very few pins representing collisions on those bits of road. So basically what we're concluding here is that if you are claiming that these crashes are happening on country lanes, you're claiming something a little bit dishonest. It's quite clear that the crashes are actually happening on the main roads through the rural areas and in the urban centres which are classed as rural. So that was my guess, and just a quick look at the crash map actually confirmed that. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't look to reduce casualty rates, but using a mishmash of data rather than focusing on precise local issues, it's next to impossible to see what the target data actually is, let alone recognize what any true benefit will be. Now, as I said before, crucially, drivers do not drive at daft speeds on these kind of roads because most drivers don't crash. So will a 20 limit have any positive benefit? Well, it's a really complex question, but The effect of speed limits on speed and safety paper I quoted earlier said the main benefit of increasing speed limits seems to be improving their credibility with the public and actually regaining control of speed behavior on highways. So maybe we can from that infer the opposite, and that if we drop a speed limit down below the speed at which most drivers would drive at, we create a real credibility problem for that speed limit. And if a speed limit isn't credible, is it going to work in terms of reducing speed? Now, that 2022 paper, the second of the two papers I mentioned, draws 5 conclusions. First, credible speed limits are defined as a speed limit accepted by most drivers without the need of enforcement. 2, credibility is different to compliance. 3, road and roadside environment affect speed limit credibility and compliance. 4, setting credible speed limit will help bring more compliance with speed limit. 5, speed limit credibility can be achieved by better matching the limit to certain characteristics of the road layout. Now, although I can't put my finger on the link, there have been changes of speed limit where raising the overall limit actually reduced overall speeds and also reduced accidents. That certainly has happened in Denmark in a trial that they were running over there several years ago. I never did find out what the final conclusion of that was. But where the limit isn't credible, most drivers will ignore it completely. When it is reasonably appropriate, most drivers will obey it or at least drive somewhere close to the limit when the road conditions allow. So it may be counterintuitive, but higher speed limits can actually reduce overall speeds. So, again, what are the rationale behind reducing the speeds? Are Surrey relying on a deterrent effect on drivers so that they go somewhere else and crash outside of Surrey's jurisdiction? Because that's much the same thinking that happened across a number of councils during the lockdown when they forced traffic onto other boroughs' roads by closing down access roads on their own patch. There was a dispute between 2 councils in southeast London about that. Now, here's an interesting fact, though. Who are we affecting by reducing speed limit? Now, Department for Transport data shows 22% of road traffic injuries are accounted for by young car drivers. There'll be at least one driver or one passenger 17 to 24 in a vehicle. Now, it's generally accepted that young male drivers tend to be more likely to drive faster because they are more likely to be sensation seekers, whilst at the same time they are less competent at scanning the details of the driving environment for road safety issues. So the drivers most likely to crash are probably the ones most likely to ignore the speed limit anyway. And if drivers do still travel to the Surrey Hills and obey the limit, will the crash rate actually increase? There's one argument that says if you reduce the speed limit to below the point at which drivers are engaged by the driving task, they actually start to daydream. So if you have a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit on a nice, pretty stretch of country road, will drivers be looking at the scenery as they plough into a bunch of cyclists who are just outside around the blind bend, or into a tractor coming the other way? I don't know, because I can't find any papers on that issue. So, all right, I'm coming to the end at last. I'm going to draw some conclusions from this. It's been a rather long piece, but as I say, I hope you found it interesting. To conclude and to draw some decent conclusions about the potential benefits and disbenefits of the move, I would really want to see the research on which the move has been based, and if indeed there is any research which supports it, and it isn't simple ideology. This is typical of the kind of argument from Mary Williams, the Brake CEO. She said, you can't engineer your way out of trouble. But that is exactly what she is trying to do by supporting these reduced speed limits. We may not be putting up barriers to separate lanes of oncoming traffic. We may not be building pavements which are barriered off from traffic to protect pedestrians. We may not be putting cycle lanes in to protect cyclists. I'm not sure how you're going to protect a horse on these kind of roads, but we are still engineering the road by lowering the speed limit. That's exactly what we're doing. And that's before we even reach the final question. which I'm not even going to look into. But how is this going to be enforced? We're looking at something, I think it's 400 square kilometres of land between the borders of the Surrey Hills area of outstanding natural beauty. So are councils going to put camera vans on remote lanes? Are they I can't see Surrey police having the resources. There's one final question. One thing I haven't seen yet is exactly what roads those lower speed limits are proposed for. If they're intending to put the 20 limit into urban areas within the Surrey National Hills, then I don't see so much of a problem. But if they are simply intending to put these 20s and 30s as blanket speed limits right across the lanes and rural roads, then I think there is a real issue. Right, that is pretty much it. I'm just going to show you one more final comment from Paul. Detailed and fascinating critique. Thank you, Paul. Well, yeah, to be honest, I do find it fascinating to dig into this kind of background material and actually find out what is behind a proposal like this, because of course we never see that. We just see the bold statement, the press release that goes off to the papers. We see the interviews that various people give to the press, who probably won't be asking the right questions. I just love the bit about the burning 4x4s being the problem, and the noisy motorcycle scramblers. Anyway, that is it for today. Thank you very much indeed for looking in. I did forget to mention the thing I usually do, which is, of course, if you do enjoy these shows, you can, of course, head over to my Facebook page, my Coffee page, and support me from over there. There's the link, coffee.com /survival skills. £3 over there buys you a month's access to all my back articles. Yeah, rather a long one today. Hope you stayed with me to the end. If you don't, maybe you can come back and watch it in installments. I do apologise for a longer than usual show today. But you'll be glad to know we finally reached the end. Back on Wednesday with another show when the weather should be slightly cooler and there are some thunderstorms promised, which will be a damn good thing for our garden, which is looking very parched at the moment. So if you are up there on your bike today, do stay cool and stay shiny side up.